Hi, everyone. Welcome to A Happy Life. I am Dr. Joshua Swift, professor of psychology at Idaho State University, licensed clinical psychologist, and author of Becoming Happy, a guide to self-care and holistic well-being. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the principle of sleep. There's an Irish proverb that seems to fit well with today's topic. It is, "A good laugh and a long sleep are the best cures in the doctor's book." We know that good sleep provides a number of physical health benefits, but can it also help provide the good laugh mentioned in the proverb? Does it lead to more happiness? In addition to discussing the evidence related to that question, in today's episode, I will also provide some recommendations for things you can do to make the most out of your sleep. But before we get started, let me just remind you to hit subscribe or follow below so you never miss any of our future episodes, and please share with others. Sleep is vital for our physical health. It provides an opportunity for our bodies to not only take a break from the stressors that they experience throughout the day, but actually restore themselves from the wear and tear that has occurred. If we compared our body to an automobile, sleep would be like taking our vehicle into the auto mechanic shop every single night for a diagnostic check and tune-up for any damage or wear that occurred while driving during the day. During this time, our body works on cleaning out toxins, repairing damaged tissues, cells, and muscles, and giving our heart and lungs a chance to slow down and get a slight rest. And although our brains are still active when we sleep, this rest period gives them a chance to focus on taking care of our bodies and consolidating memories, rather than constantly processing incoming sensations. With all the good things that happen when we sleep, it is perhaps not surprising that our bodies need so much of it. It is recommended that adults get 7 to 9 hours of sleep each night. The exact amount needed depends on a number of factors, including genes, stress, physical health, body composition, gender, and age. Whatever our individual needed amount is, it is vital that we get it on a regular basis. Now, although small amounts, say less than 7 hours of lost sleep over the course of the week, can be made up at later times, a significant amount of sleep debt, more than, say, 7 hours, often has a long-term negative health impact. Unfortunately, it's estimated that 1 in 3 adults fall in the significant amount of sleep debt category. Now, given all of the good that happens when we sleep, one might assume that the more sleep we can get, the better. Unfortunately, oversleeping is associated with many of the same health problems that we notice with undersleeping. So we see that there is clear evidence that regularly getting the right amount of sleep is necessary for our physical health. But what about our mood and mental health? Is there a link between sleep and happiness? Well, let's start with the correlational data. Correlational data is obtained when researchers assess two variables at the same time. Now, it's impossible to infer cause and effect from correlational data because you don't know what comes first. Does, say, good sleep cause happiness, or does happiness cause good sleep? But correlational data can give us a sense of how much overlap occurs between the variables of interest. The existing correlational data suggests that sleep quality shows a significant linear relationship with happiness, and sleep duration shows an inverted U-shaped relationship. Now, this matches what I previously shared about sleep and physical health. Getting too much or too little sleep results in low levels of well-being and happiness. So we need to get the right amount. But of the sleep that we do get, we want as much of it as possible to be good quality sleep. So overall, The correlational data suggests that sleep may explain up to 30% of the variance in our happiness, which is about twice the amount of variance than any other single variable that has been studied. Now, building off of correlational studies, longitudinal research, where variables are studied in a time sequence, can provide some initial clues regarding the causal relationships between variables. And several of these types of studies exist that have examined next day's impact of a previous night's sleep. In these studies, some record of sleep quality occurs maybe during the night, like through a wearable device, or first thing in the morning, usually through some subjective report from the participants. Participants then monitor and report on their mood throughout the following day. A recent review identified 29 studies that used this type of design. And the authors of this review reported that there is clear evidence from the existing studies that a poor night's sleep leads to negative next day mood states, and a good night's sleep leads to positive ones. Now, taking an even longer view, researchers in England followed over 4,500 older adults for 6 years. And at time one, participants were asked to report on a number of sleep problems, such as waking up in the morning feeling tired and having difficulty falling asleep, as well as the average duration of sleep per night that they got. And then 6 years later, they checked in with these same participants to assess for symptoms of depression. And as the researchers expected, both sleep problems and short duration of sleep predicted later depressive symptoms, particularly when both of those occurred together. Now, although the existing longitudinal results demonstrate a temporal relationship between sleep and happiness, experimental studies where the researchers manipulate the conditions and then observe the effects can identify true causal relationships between the variables. And several of these types of studies also exist for sleep and happiness. In one such study, the authors locked 34 15 to 17-year-olds in a sleep laboratory for 10 days and 9 nights, with parental permission, of course. For the first 5 nights of the study, 1/3 of these adolescents they only let them sleep 5 hours per night. Another third was allowed to sleep 7.5 hours per night. And then the final third was allowed to sleep 10 hours per night. Mood was then measured every 3 hours during the non-sleeping time. Now, compared to the baseline ratings, those in the 5-hour sleep group reported significantly less happiness and significantly more depression and anger during the restricted sleep period. And those in the 7.5-hour sleep group showed no change on these mood variables between the baseline and the restricted sleep period. But those in the 10-hour sleep group actually showed improvements in their happiness during the study. Now, importantly, after the restricted sleep period, those in the 5-hour sleep group were allowed to have 2 nights of recovery sleep, where they could also get 10 hours of sleep per night. However, the researchers found that these recovery nights were not enough to ameliorate the negative moods that were caused by the 5 nights of too little sleep. So overall, the data on the relationship between sleep and happiness is compelling. Based on the current evidence, we can say that sleep is the single best predictor of someone's level of happiness. Sleep seems to have both a predictive and causative effect on happiness. And speaking of this impact, I really like a comparison that psychologist and University of Southern California professor Dr. Norbert Schwartz once made. He said that making $60,000 more in annual income has less of an effect on our daily happiness than getting an extra hour of sleep a night. So, if you want to improve your level of happiness and you can only focus on one variable, the research strongly suggests that it should be your sleep. So how do we improve our sleep? Well, A significant amount of research has actually been conducted on this topic, and the recommendations that have come out of that research are often referred to as sleep hygiene. Now, I really like the idea that that name conveys. Just like you take care of your teeth by brushing and flossing every day, and you take care of your hair by washing it and combing it routinely, and you take care of your skin by showering and bathing on a regular basis, you also have to take care of your sleep. And by following some of the simple steps and routines, you can see dramatic improvements in your sleep quality and, in turn, your overall happiness. So, first, go to bed earlier. You may be familiar with Benjamin Franklin's quote: early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. Now, I remember first hearing this quote from my parents and teachers when I was a teenager. I really like to stay up late and then sleep in as much as possible. And in turn, I know that my teenagers have heard it several times from me. But now I can tell my children that it's not just a saying a wise person that lived 300 years ago said, but there's actual research backing it. Our bodies have a sleep or biological clock in them. The clock is called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and it's located in the hypothalamus portion of our brain, tucked right in the bottom part, right before the start of your brainstem. Now, this part of the brain receives signals from our eyes about the amount of natural light that is present outside. When it perceives that it is dark outside, it starts sending out melatonin to tell our body to start to shut down. And it gets into this kind of 24-hour pattern. So even if we have changes in the timing of light and darkness, for example, when we experience jet lag from travel, it takes a little while for adjustments to be made. It is also possible to try to get into a sleep-wake pattern that deviates from the normal light patterns of the day. And night shift workers, or those who live in the very northern and southern parts of the world, sometimes have to learn to sleep when it's light out and stay awake when it's dark. So although the pattern can be shifted, our body really doesn't like this. If it is taking in light, it wants to be awake. And if it is taking in dark, it wants to sleep. And so sleep quality often suffers in these situations. So when possible, it is recommended that elementary school-aged children go to bed between 8 and 9 p.m., teenagers between 9 and 10 p.m., and adults around 10 p.m. Now, this will differ from one person to the next, depending on how many total hours of sleep one needs and when one has to wake up in the morning. But remember, if you want to set a goal to go to sleep earlier, make small adjustments to get from your old sleep time to your new desired sleep time. And don't let yourself sleep in. Otherwise, you'll find your body wants to keep to your old schedule and you'll lay in bed awake for a long time. So this brings us to our second sleep hygiene recommendation. Try to be consistent with when you go to bed and when you wake up every day. Now, there can be slight variations to this, say over the weekend, but research shows that if you always go to bed and wake up within the same hour windows, your sleep quality will remain consistently strong. Third, avoid naps, particularly if you're experiencing sleep problems. Remember, your body wants to be in a 24-hour sleep-wake cycle. If you take a nap sometime during the day, your body can get confused about how long it needs to then be awake and when it should go to bed. Naps during the day usually result in difficulty falling asleep that night, and this can really create an unhealthy pattern. I also remember as a teenager, I would come home every day from school and my after school sport, and I'd take a 1 or 2 hour nap on the couch until dinner was ready. I was always so exhausted and my body couldn't seem to help it. But then when bedtime came around, I wasn't ready for sleep. So I would stay up until midnight or 1 a.m. before eventually going to bed. Now, the next day, I'd have to get up at 5:30 a.m. for early morning church classes before the start of regular school. So by the time school got out, I was exhausted again and needed another long nap. It was a really vicious cycle until I eventually forced myself to stop taking naps. And when I did that, my body became ready to go to bed at 10, and I started getting much better night's sleep. Now, if you can't give up naps completely, just make them as short as possible, maybe 10 to 20 minutes at most, and do them as early as possible, finishing before 3 p.m. That way, your body is ready to go to sleep when it's bedtime. Fourth, avoid things that keep you awake right before bedtime. This includes caffeine, which acts as a stimulant, exercise, which releases endorphins into your body to give you energy, and screen light from electronic devices, which fools your brain into thinking it is still daytime. Now, for caffeine, it is recommended that one cut off all intake at least 8 hours before it is time to go to bed. For exercise, it depends on the type of activity that you engage in. Research shows that regular exercise actually improves sleep as long as you stop it at the right time. If it's something that is vigorous, like jogging, biking, weightlifting, or an active sport, then it's recommended that you stop at least an hour before bedtime. But if it's moderate or light, like walking or stretching, then there's probably no problem doing it right up until it's time to go to bed. And then for screen time, it is the blue light that seems to cause the most sleep interference. And because of this, some have suggested stopping blue light exposure 1 to 2 hours before bedtime. Many devices have night options where the screen settings can be changed to limit the blue light exposure. And one can also wear glasses that are designed to prevent the blue light from getting to your eyes. Also, red bulbs can be placed in the lamps closest to your bed. But the easiest solution, though, is just to turn off all electronics and lights 30 minutes or an hour before it's time for bed. In addition to removing the exposure to the blue light, this will give your mind a chance to wind down and prepare for sleep. And that leads to my last recommendation. Develop a sleep routine. Although your brain primarily relies on light patterns to determine when it is time for bed, it also responds to cues in your environment. Through classical conditioning, you can repeatedly pair certain activities with bedtime. That way, when your body is exposed to those activities in the future, your brain will automatically signal that it is time to fall asleep. Now, what activities you choose can be based on personal preference, just as long as they're relaxing. Ideas include taking a soothing shower or bath, listening to gentle music or sounds, exposure to certain smells like lavender, rose, or jasmine, or breathing activities and meditation. Also related to a routine, you want to pair your bed with sleep. That way, when you lay down in it, it's a powerful cue to your body to shut down. If you frequently do other things in your bed, like read, watch TV, or work on your computer, that signal will not be there. Now, even with all of the above, there may be times when you have trouble sleeping. You may not be able to sleep at the start of the night, or you may wake up early and not be able to fall back asleep. Most recommend that after 20 or so minutes of laying awake in bed, it is a good sign that you should get up and do something else. So get up out of your bed, go to a different room and read a book, write down some of the thoughts that you're having, or maybe listen to some soothing music. And then once you start feeling tired, go hop back in bed and then try to sleep again. Now, as you do this, you may worry. You may think, wait, didn't Dr. Swift say that I need 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night? If I get up in the middle of the night or if I don't fall asleep on time, I'm not going to get that in. And then I'll be tired tomorrow. So it's important that as you work on all of these steps to improve your sleep, that you don't stress or panic about them. Because the more you stress about your sleep, the harder it will be to fall asleep. Stress, worry, anxiety, they all send signals to our bodies to activate and stay awake. So it ends up making things worse. I'll always remember a client that I worked with some time ago in my clinical practice that struggled with this. Now, given some of her experiences that she had in her life, she developed this fear that she was going to get schizophrenia. And she heard that a lack of sleep could cause hallucinations. And so she worried that she wouldn't be able to sleep. She would start hallucinating, and this would then cause her to get schizophrenia. Now, prior to having these worries, she always slept fine. But once these worries came into her head, she found it impossible to fall asleep. She would just lay in bed and tell herself, I have to fall asleep. Or if I don't fall asleep now, I'm going to get schizophrenia. And these worries impacted her to such a degree that a couple weeks went by where she was only getting 1 or 2 hours of sleep a night. And at that level, hallucinations could have really been a possibility, although schizophrenia still wasn't. It was at that point when she came in to see me. And our solution was simple. I just worked on helping her let go of her anxiety. She had to let go of the pressure she was putting on herself to fall asleep. We also added in several other sleep hygiene techniques that I've mentioned today, but the biggest thing was for her to let go of her worry. And once she did that, she was able to start sleeping normally again. So if you have a night or two where you have trouble sleeping, just keep consistent with the steps mentioned. You may be tired the next day, but don't worry. Just keep to the pattern, and your body will eventually start to follow through. With all of these things that I mentioned, commitment is the most important part. There's really nothing difficult or complex about the recommendations that I have provided. It just takes a commitment to follow through on them and make them a habit. And as you do that, you should see improvements in your sleep and in turn in your happiness and well being. If you are having consistent trouble, though, you could speak to a doctor or a sleep specialist. They'd be able to help you identify the source of the problem and then work with you to get your sleep back on track. Well, thanks for joining us today on A Happy Life. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe or follow below to receive notifications for all of our future episodes. You can also listen to past episodes by visiting our YouTube channel, which is linked below. And as always, please feel free to submit comments on topics that you'd like us to address in the future. If you found this episode interesting or useful, please share it with others. Take care until next time.